Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In podcast. My name is Sarah Collins, and I'm an occupational therapist, homeschool mom, and founder of Homeschool OT. Today, we are diving into a topic that has completely transformed the way that I think about children, learning, and even myself as an adult. We're talking about interoception with Kelly Mahler. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you've probably heard me mention interoception before. In fact, we have several episodes that are linked in the show notes where we've already talked about interoception. It is often called our eighth sense, and it helps us to understand what is happening inside of our bodies. Our hunger, our thirst, needing to use the bathroom, feeling overwhelmed, feeling calm, feeling excited. All of those experiences begin with us understanding our internal body signals. But today's conversation takes this one step further. As homeschool parents, we spend a lot of time helping our children develop language. We read aloud, we narrate, we ask questions, we encourage descriptive writing. We ask our children to tell us what happened, what they noticed, and what they think. All because these things have value. We really care about our children's thoughts and their ability to communicate them well. But what if some children struggle to find the words because they're still learning to notice the experiences happening within their own bodies? Kelly and I explore the connection between interoception and language development, including why understanding internal body signals may help children to develop richer vocabulary, stronger narration skills, and more meaningful self-expression. Before we jump in, I'd like to thank Lovevery, the title sponsor of the OT is In podcast. One of the reasons I really appreciate Lovevery's reading skill set program is that it recognizes reading is about so much more than sounding out words. Strong language skills are built through conversation and curiosity, observation, and meaningful experiences. And as you'll hear today, helping children notice and describe those internal experiences may be another important piece of that language puzzle. You can learn more about Lovevery through the link in the show notes. So now, let's jump in. One of the things I hear most often from homeschool parents is this quiet worry. My child is trying so hard, so why does learning still feel like such a struggle? I want to share a quick story from a mom in Virginia who found a solution by working with Learning RX, because I think a lot of you will recognize yourselves in it. She had two daughters, both struggling in different ways. When her older daughter had finished a full brain training program, what stood out wasn't just better reading, spelling, and math, though those did improve too, but the emotional shift. Her frustration dropped, she stopped dreading schoolwork, and for the first time, she could work independently for longer stretches without melting down. Then, her younger daughter started training, and within just a short time, this mom saw improvements in reading, attention, and memory. But my favorite part, she shared that her daughter was suddenly reading chapter books on her own with no prompting or nagging. I've heard so many amazing testimonies like this from Learning RX clients because this is what they do. They don't teach content, they strengthen the underlying cognitive skills like attention, working memory, and processing speed that make learning feel easier and more rewarding in the first place. Every client is different, and your child may or may not achieve the same results as this family. But if you're homeschooling a child who's bright but distracted, capable but frustrated, or exhausted by daily learning battles, Learning RX might be worth exploring. Their research backed programs help the brain get stronger so that learning doesn't feel like such a fight anymore for kids or parents. So head to learningrx.com/homeschoolot to get special discounted pricing on the cognitive skills assessment and sign up to get additional information and free resources from the Learning RX homeschool support team. Hey, and welcome back to the OTs. And my name is Sarah Collins. And today I actually have a bit of OT royalty here with us, guys. This is Kelly Mahler, who is really the guru on interoception. Now, if this is a concept that you've never heard of, I do want to point you back. We do have several other episodes on interoception that are really give more of the background. But Kelly here is going to explain even more, go into depth on how her work has introduced interoception even to the occupational therapy community. And I will tell you, even going through OT school, like when I first graduated back in 2008, literally never heard of the term. So it has all been through continuing education, some that I've learned from Kelly, her curriculum, her work that has really transformed my practice as well. So Kelly, can you introduce yourself before we get going and into this topic?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the podcast, Sarah. Yeah, I'm Kelly Mahler, occupational therapist for 25 years, which is hard to believe. And I share the same experience as you, Sarah, where when I graduated OT school, I had no idea that there was 8 senses. 7. Yeah, and so it took me about 10 years into my career to even discover this thing we call interoception. And it really has shaped my practice. I work primarily with kids. I do have some young adult clients, which are such an amazing addition to my practice. And I've always been so interested in helping people with just understanding who they are, understanding how their body shows up in this sensory world, what their body needs to be comfortable, and emotion regulation, all those things, mental health. And so when I learned about interoception, it really just was like a light bulb moment. Literally, I was like, what? There's a sense that helps us know how our body feels. And I was just taking that for granted. I didn't realize I was taking that for granted, but I didn't realize how many of my clients were so disconnected from their bodies. And just to be honest, I personally didn't realize how disconnected I was from my own body.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really has just learning about this has shaped me as an occupational therapist, but also as a person personally. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. How did you first learn about interoception? Like, how's that concept brought to you?
Yeah, it wasn't through I have to have I want an exciting story, but it's not. I read a research article and it was by Dr. Bud Craig, who has recently passed, but he was an amazing neuroscientist. And he talked about interoception being this new sense, and he termed it as the sense of the physiological condition of our body. And I'm like,
Okay.
sounds pretty important. So I read this paper and it really, that's where I was like, light bulbs.
My first time that I heard about it was through Kurt Thompson's work, and he was talking about how there's a difference in feelings and emotions, but how our world here in American culture that we equate the two together. And it really made me stop and think and be like, you're right. So we really have to understand what's going on inside our body. My heart's beating faster, my shoulders are tense. And those could be any type of emotion, but we so often label them as one big thing and think that, oh, if your shoulders are tight and your heartbeat's racing, you must be anxious. That's not true. There's so many different things that could be. So we have to really be in tune to it.
Absolutely.
Fascinating stuff. Fascinating. Yeah. So a lot of people, when they're thinking about interoception, they're thinking about thirst or hunger or needing to go to the bathroom, right? Those are like the main three, but what are we missing if that's like where we stop with trying to understand?
Oh my goodness, so much. Even so, I like to think about it in terms of interoception helping us know all of these homeostatic emotions, which I know is a fancy word. I never heard of it before, but that's knowing when we're thirsty or hungry, knowing when we are in pain, knowing when we're hot, where we're cold, knowing when we're getting sensory overwhelm, knowing when we need to pee, knowing when we need to poop. There's just knowing when we're sick. Like all of those are really important homeostatic emotions to identify, to know when our body's experiencing one or multiple of those emotions so that we know how to take care of our body. But then we also have the whole affective side, which again, fancy term, but what scientists mean by that is knowing when we're anxious or frustrated or we feel safe or we feel excited or happy. So the interoception is so broad and it helps us to really understand our bodies in very different and very important ways.
So then we have to go from okay, so if I'm interpreting this, what do I do with it, right? And that's so much of the breakdown, especially with the parents that I hear from, that their questions are, my child is really struggling with emotional regulation, is often the term that they come to me with. So how do we get from the knowing to the doing?
Yeah. Could I rewind up that question a little bit? Because
Love
I
it.
feel like I was like at that, I hear that question so often too, of the knowing, which is identifying your emotion, and then the doing. But what we are missing, you've alluded to this, but I want to be explicit, is before the emotion comes the body signals.
Yeah.
So being in our bodies, noticing how our hands feel, noticing how our eyes feel, noticing how our heart feels, and really getting in our bodies. And kids have to feel safe and they have to feel like they're going to be believed for when they get in their bodies and they share how their body signals or what their body is telling them. Then we can get to the place where, okay, what do all these body signals mean for you? What is the emotion? And then we get to the what can we do about it, the action piece of what does your body need in this moment? And for so long, and I was like, totally in this group of people, I was at the emotion level. Let's identify how you're feeling. Oh, I'm frustrated right now. And then what can you do about it? Oh, take deep breaths, go for a walk. Like when we start from the body signal level, what we're finding is that I have so many things to say about this, but what is so interesting is that kids that start to connect to their body signals, they start to be able to find their own actions. They don't have to memorize what I think is a good idea for them. They don't memorize, oh, I have to take deep breaths for an hour. Oh, I have to go for a walk. They start to be able to see, for example, like one of my clients, he notices that he has this buzzy feeling in the back of his tongue. It means he's anxious. And when that happens to him, he looks around the room and counts all of the square or rectangle objects in the room. No one really knows he's doing it, but
Love
it's
that.
so regulating. And that is nothing I would have ever thought to teach someone to do.
Yeah, you wouldn't be like, oh, you feel buzzy? You should count. First, you wouldn't even come up with buzzy. That's his word.
So this whole interoception work is just setting us off down like this really, like, I think it's so fun, like
It
to
is.
discover the individual, like individualized answers and internal experiences that each of our kids have. It's like really cool. And it's so much more effective. They're not memorizing now. They're like actually discovering their own bodies.
I had a kiddo who told me his brain felt noodly. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to dig into that a little bit. But then his mom was able to equate, like they had the night before eaten spaghetti and they were talking about how everything overlaps and it's confusing and how it like just all together sometimes feels jumbled. And he put that totally into how his brain felt at one point. And I was like, that's genius. What a good expression.
Yes, and can I piggyback off that? Because I think when our kids share something about the way their body feels, even if it doesn't like quite make sense to us, it is so important to show validation and belief and be like, that is so cool that your brain feels noodly. Can you tell me more about it? Because
Got
what
it.
I find is there usually is some kind of logical connection, and it gives us a platform for us to help. Okay, then now you have a word that's meaningful to that child. Like when your brain feels noodly, I wonder what we can do to help your noodly brain, right? So now it's so individualized. So I love that example.
And this actually brings to one of the parts that I wanted to get into here within the homeschool world is that when we are, yes, believing what you're saying, but also getting curious about what our kids are saying, we're allowing them to have greater language, right? We're not constricting them to these adjectives that made up or that we are used to, but allowing them to really come up with how to describe their brains or any part of their body, not just their brains, but any part of their body. So, do you feel like that interoception influences language development or the other way around? Or do you know? What do you think?
I think it's a probably a back and forth process. if we're in our bodies, if we're in experiences where we're noticing body signals, we're starting to label them in a condition where we're free to use whatever language is meaningful to us. And I don't mean any shame out there, because I was a parent that didn't understand interoception when my kids were little. So
Yeah, same.
I was the should feels. Oh, your hands will only be this or this. And I don't even think I was talking about I wasn't even talking about body signals, if I was honest. I'm like, but if they have this opportunity that we can give them now that we understand interoception, they can start to develop this language to describe the way their body feels. But then I think that I think that language only develops even more, like it's a back and forth process, is what I'm trying to say. The more in your body you are, the more language you develop, the more language you have, the more you understand your body. So it's like back and forth process.
I think that's absolutely true. I would love to find research on that, and families have asked me that. And I'm like, I don't think there is any, but it totally makes sense to me. And maybe we could spur that on. Maybe the speech therapists and the OTs can get together and come up with this, because I really think that would be fascinating information to have. So you've mentioned belief quite a bit, but to believe, we have to really be able to start those conversations in our own homes. And I'm sure there's parents right now that are like, okay, so how would I even get started with talking about this with my kids? What are your go-to getting started points?
For parents, I'm going to say something, and if this makes someone cringe, it's okay, you're not alone. But I really encourage parents to start dabbling in modeling. What I mean by that is talking out loud about the way their own body parts feel. So when I think about interoception, especially when I first get started, I try to thinking about how your entire body feels is often too much for most people. I just think about like your hands. Pick a day and talk out loud about the way your hands feel during the day, like when you're washing the dishes, or maybe like when you're writing, or when you're holding a warm or a cold drink, and just talk out loud about the way your hands feel, like those body signals in your hands. And so I like to get families started with kind of that process. And then, our kids are like hearing, now we're taking an invisible process and we're making it a little bit visible. Oh, the kids, they're little sponges. They're probably not consciously thinking, oh, mom's talking about her hands. Maybe they are, but they start to see mom's talking out loud about the way her hands feel. And then I like to bridge on that, if parents feel comfortable, talk about the body signal you're noticing and then the action you take to take care of your body. If you just, I don't know, you cut an apple and you're like, oh, my hands are so sticky after I cut that apple, I'm going to go wash them. Think about how your hands feel and what you're doing to take care of it. So I like to help parents. And if you're a parent too that's listening to this and you're like, I don't know how my body feels, how in the world am I going to be a model? That is so common. I can't even tell you. You are not alone. We live in a society that is largely disconnected from our bodies. But I think just even having honest conversations with your kids about, gosh, I have a really weird feeling in my body right now, but I'm not sure what it is. Or gosh, I have this strange feeling in my stomach, but I don't know if I'm hungry or if I have to pee. I don't even know what's going on with me. Just be honest and authentic, and you're still modeling that there's this inner experience that's really important to pay attention to. And it's messy and it's tricky, but it's also so important to pay attention to. So if we can get that modeling on board first, then we can turn the curiosity over to the kids.
Love that. We're going to pause this episode for 1 second so I can personally thank Lovevery for being our title sponsor. You know, one thing that I wish that I knew earlier in my homeschool journey was this: reading does not need to feel high pressure to become a part of daily life. As an occupational therapist, I now understand that readiness develops over time, and that children learn best when literacy is woven into connection, play, movement, and everyday experiences. And that's one reason why I really appreciate the Lovevery reading skill set, and why I wish that we could have had it when my kids were little. The reading skill set introduces foundational literacy skills in developmentally thoughtful ways through hands-on activities, interactive materials, and playful learning experiences. It allows children to engage with reading without turning it into constant performance or pressure. Especially in the early years, literacy can become something children experience with us instead of something done to them. So learn more about the Lovevery reading skill set at lovevery.com. Now, back to the show. Welcome back. Now, when Kelly was talking, when we left off, she was mentioning about narration, right? Not so much in the words that she was using, but actually, when I tie it back into our homeschool community, thinking that's what she's doing. She's taking so much of, hey, we were out at the park today, tell me what happened, and then taking it into the next step. And we've mentioned that so many times through Julie Bogart's work, and we have an episode back with Julie Bogart, who is really talking about how your thoughts correspond to the words that come out of your mouth and then can go onto the paper. And this can bridge into the same exact thing with narrating how our body is feeling these internal body signals. So when you're thinking about how on earth am I going to actually talk this through, especially when I don't really know, think about what we're asking our kids to do on a daily basis. And another really good book or resource when thinking about narration is Know and Tell by Karen Glass, and I'll make sure that's linked in the show notes as well. So Kelly, if we're thinking about this, really understanding our own bodies and then being able to narrate it and talk about it through. And yes, I agree that when I started doing this, I felt absolutely absurd. And that my son, who is mainly the reason that I was doing a lot of this advice for or researching more about it, he was like, Mom, what podcast have you listened to now? Because he's totally, I know you're doing something weird, right? So, did you find that the awkwardness led up at some point and it carried over into your family culture, or how did that go for you?
Oh my God. First of all, I personally was so awkward trying to
Yeah.
talk a lot about the way my body felt. I was doing it, if I'm just gonna be honest
Yeah.
with you again. So like to myself, like yeah. And my kids, like, they always catch me doing new and maybe a little off-center thing. So
Yep. Same.
yeah, but they also know about interoception because of my bias and talking about it. So yeah, talking about it out loud. Sometimes they still to this day, even though we're like a decade in, they're like, Mom,
Mhm.
come on. And other days they're like, they start to tell me about their bodies and what's going
Mhm.
on in their own language. And it's just really, I just feel like it's such a privileged opportunity for anyone to share with us their inner world and tell us a little bit about what's going on. So I'm in it for the ride.
Yeah.
Some days they don't want to tell me anything, and other days they do. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful thought of you're right. Like whenever somebody is sharing with us, and this goes back to they need to feel believed and they need to feel safe because they're really showing us internally inside of their bodies things that they might not even have realized before this point in time. So to share it with anybody is just such a privilege. And also that can lead to advocacy. Without this awareness, how on earth can you advocate for anything?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
so many adults are like just learning about their own bodies and are like, I have lived my whole life pleasing other people,
Mhm.
ignoring what my body needs in order to get by, to be deemed valuable member of society because I'm tough,
Yeah.
I can push through. So this is a real evolution, I think, for a lot of parents that they're going on this journey with their kids. And that self-advocacy and understanding what your body needs in this world for comfort, for thriving, that I want to give that to my kids. I don't want them to have to wait till they're in their 40s
Yes,
discover.
right. Absolutely. Now, when we talk about this being the eighth sense, now, yes, probably it was because that's the last one that we've heard of and discovered, right? But why is it as important as the other sensory systems, and how does it relate to those?
Yeah, I know that all the senses are always working together.
Mhm.
None of the senses are in isolation. We don't quite know exactly how interoception is playing with all the other seven senses, but the way I think about it now is interoception helps us to know how all of the other sensory information affects the way our body feels. So what I mean by
Yeah.
that is like, how do different sounds in the environment affect the way our body feels? So some of the sounds might be soothing to our bodies, to our nervous system. Some might be alerting in a good way. Some might be
Yeah.
alerting in an uncomfortable way. The sensory information that's coming in from either the outside world or even from maybe our internal world, like our vestibular system and balance. Maybe we're someone that gets car sick. That's a really
Yeah.
good example of that movement input, that vestibular input affecting the way someone's body feels, like getting nauseous or
Sure.
getting a headache or whatever it is. So I think interoception just is that feedback system of how all of the other senses are showing up and creating comfort or discomfort.
Yeah. So I want to take a few minutes and talk through your interoception curriculum because it is one of the most recommended things by me to families. And so just hearing it from your own words so that people understand more about what exactly goes into your curriculum and why do you feel like it's beneficial for people? And then I'll say why I think it's beneficial for people, but I'd love for them to hear it from you too.
The Interoception Curriculum is divided into three sections, which kind of touches on what we were speaking on previously. Was it starts at the noticing body signal level. So the whole first part of the curriculum is divided into lessons on different body parts. So what are all the different ways your hands can feel, your feet can feel, your eyes can feel, your heart can feel. So it's a lot of it's designed to be highly playful, highly hands-on, experiencing your body signals and really talking about them in live time, meaning when you're experiencing a signal, let's talk about it, holding an ice pack and talking about the way your hands feel in that moment. And so we really work through building across that section to how does your entire body feel, one body part at a time. And then we move on to the part two, section two, which is called emotion. And that's now connecting all these body signals you're noticing. What do they mean for you? What do these tense hands or noodly brain or buzzy tongue mean for you? And then we get to the part three of the curriculum, which is the action piece. And that's exploring so many different feel good actions to find what works for each person's body. And the reason we have that at the end is because, like we said before, kids now, many times at that point in the curriculum, really understand their bodies a lot more. They feel really confident with us, safe with us. They take chances to explore a lot of different unique things that might regulate their bodies. And they're able to really have the power to be able to say, yes, that works for my body, and no, that doesn't work for my body. So it really systematically builds to this ability to be able to regulate our body's needs.
I love it so much. Now, we've used this even in my own homeschool, partially developing language and then actually understanding even structures of sentences, right? So as we're going through, first of all, we were doing these experiments, which if you're talking about anatomy, we're going through the whole body. So we're bringing in some science here as well. And then there's a big difference in my hand is wet, right? So that's if I jump into my nerd language here, we've got our subject, our linking verb, and then actually how it is the adjective there versus my hand touches water, right? So those are what your hand is doing versus how your hand is feeling. And a lot of kiddos can say what their hands are doing, but not necessarily how they're feeling. I've got the same kiddo actually who said his hand is noodly or his head is noodly, is very into patterns and language. And so we're actually working on diagramming these sentences because he finds that so fascinating. So we're pulling it all together in our OT sessions. Now, I do want, because there are some families that have come back to me that are like, but what about for my older kids who are going to think it's weird to touch an ice pack and to talk about that? What is some advice for parents of older kids that maybe they've missed this? We're going to really dive in on bodies when we're younger, but are starting as their kids are older and recognizing that, yeah, your kid's just disconnected, or us ourselves, we're disconnected. What are some ways that older kids can benefit?
Yeah, my favorite clients are usually the more reluctant participators, especially the teenagers. And it's going to depend on each client. Usually, like I just have a straight up conversation about the fact that this is like the newest sense that scientists are talking about. And if they are interested in that kind of stuff, like we will do a mini science lesson on this is how it works. These are where all of the interoceptors are located in your body, and it's pulling in information. And this is what happens in your brain. So I really try to make it as mature as possible. We also talk, and I sometimes like it really depends on them, but I'll show them blogs about or videos about adults that are talking about doing their own interoception journey. So I try to show them that this is not just for like kids. This is a lifespan thing. And I try to really pull it into the way that they will receive information and keep an open mind. And sometimes if I can hook them in with they might not be holding an ice pack, but maybe they'll try pop rocks with me. I try to find the experiments that they might be a little open to, or will they create experiments and put me through experiments? I try any way in. I try things that will hook them and see if we can find that.
That's so great. Kelly, thank you so much for being here today, for explaining a little bit more about the body system itself, but also how we can apply it through our own homes, kids, birth all the way up through us as adults. Where can people find your resources? And actually, some of those blogs are really important things that you were talking about too. Where are the best resources to go from here?
Probably my website would be the best place. It has lots of resources, maybe too many, but you're in for a deep dive. If you're for a deep dive, it's there for you. It's mahler.com. And if you go to the free printables section on my website, you can download, we have an entire booklet on adult modeling or interoception modeling. If people are interested in learning more about that, there's a little search bar. So if you want to learn something about, I don't know, interoception and toileting, you can search whatever, and you're probably bound to find something on the website that's of your interest.
Beautiful. Thank you again so much for being here. And I will make sure that all those things are linked in the show notes.
Great. Thanks for having me.
You guys, this was such a fascinating conversation. One of my biggest takeaways is that before children can tell us how they feel, they first have to notice what is happening inside of their bodies. Before they can write rich descriptions, advocate for themselves, or regulate their emotions, they need opportunities to develop language around those internal experiences. As homeschool parents, we already do this in so many ways. We narrate books or discuss ideas. We encourage our children to tell us about their day. And interoception simply invites us to expand those conversations to include what's happening inside the body as well. A huge thank you to Kelly Mahler for joining us today and for all of the work that she has done to help both therapists like myself and families like myself to better understand interoception. So be sure to visit the show notes where I will link her website and her resources. And I'd also like to thank Love Every, the title sponsor of the OT is In podcast. Their reading skill set program is built around developing strong language foundations through meaningful interactions and experiences. And today's conversation is a wonderful reminder that language development doesn't only happen on a page. It also develops as children learn, understand, describe, and communicate their own experiences. And if today's episode left you thinking, okay, Sarah, this makes sense, but what does this actually look like in my homeschool day? Well, then I'd love to invite you to join the OT is In Insiders. This is brand new, you guys. And each month, inside the Insiders, I take one of our recent podcast topics and offer short practical training focused specifically on homeschooling. So guess what this month's topic is going to be? Interoception and how we apply it to the homeschool day. And then we're going to open it up for live questions and answers so you can get the support that your unique child needs. Think of it like pulling up a chair, grabbing a cup of coffee, and picking an OT's brain about your homeschool. Even more importantly, it's a chance to connect with other families who understand this journey because homeschooling is not alone schooling. You can join us through that link in the show notes. I'm Sarah Collins, occupational therapist and fellow homeschool mom. Thanks for listening and recognizing that you are not doing this alone because the OT is always in.